Welcome to another edition of the Giants Huddle Podcast, brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. John Schmelk, Paul Dottino, in the Hackensack Meridian Health Podcast Studio. Keep getting better. We go to Indianapolis in the NFL Combine for one of the great producers of NFL Films, executive producer and host of the NFL Matchup Show, which you can find on ESPN, the one and only Greg Cosell. Greg, good to talk to you again, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing great, guys. Sorry that we're doing it this way, but it's always great talking with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll make sure we see you in person very soon, Greg. So let's start here, because every year I feel like you're at different places in terms of this draft class. How much work have you done on this draft class, and where you at?
Yeah, I mean, not as much as I normally have by the Combine, because I feel like the Super Bowl just happened yesterday.
It feels that way.
Yeah, so, I mean, because I can't really start in detail till like mid-January. Now, I have a baseline of a lot of guys, because what I do in the summer is I watch about 100, 120 guys that are likely to be in the next year's draft. Now, usually 25, 30 of those guys drop off one way or another. But I've seen a lot of the main guys. It's not a great draft, in my opinion, from what I've seen so far. Certainly at the positions that we're used to talking about, those sort of main positions, the fun positions, I guess. This is a draft where I'm hearing from people, and I think the tape validates it. Normally in any given draft, there's probably 15 to 20 players that have true first-round grades. This year, I'm hearing there might be 10 or 11 that have true first-round grades. But, of course, 32 guys are going to get drafted in the first round.
The Ohio State guys up at the top, Greg.
I've done those guys.
Yeah, I figured you had. So I'm going to ask you, because there's a lot of flavor kinds of preferences here in terms of how do you rank them and does the positional value come into play. Can I go right there to the top handful of Ohio State guys and ask you how you feel about their translations to the pros?
Yeah, those guys I've done. So, yeah, you definitely can do that.
So how would you rate the most NFL potential in terms of that cluster of Ohio State guys?
Well, I mean, they're really good players. So the question becomes deployment in the NFL. Like Caleb Downs is a very good player, but he's not Nick Warrior or Derwin James. He's probably, and I don't have his numbers right now. I think DBs go. They work out on tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure the numbers are in. I just haven't seen them. My guess is he's going to be in the 5'11" to 6 foot range and probably weigh, 195 to 200.
Probably so like Brian Branch kind of size, right? Like kind of like that type of thing.
Yeah, and a lot of people see him that way. The other two names that I thought of when I finished his tape, and I watched him last summer and this year, I thought of Budda Baker and Antoine Winfield.
Yeah, those are good.
And I think he's going to be a really good player. His tape is fun to watch. He's smart. He's savvy. I spoke to a coach who told me that his intelligence was off the charts. But he's not Nick Warrior or Derwin James. So you have to know what he is. But he's a really, really good football player.
How about Sonny Styles, the other guy, that, again, a non-premium position, a converted safety? Your thoughts on him?
Love him. Did him last summer before anybody knew about him. Called up a good friend of mine who worked for me years ago on the matchup show, who's been a scout in the league for years. I said, hey, he does the Midwest, by the way. I said, Sonny Styles. I said, this guy is phenomenal. He goes, oh, yeah, he is ridiculous. I love Sonny Styles. He's 6'3", probably 240-ish. He's only in his second year playing linebacker. He was much better this year, just in terms of how he saw the position. I spoke to a GM that I know well yesterday who's been in the league for years, who told me he was the best interview he's ever done. So I don't think there's any negative warts on Sonny Styles. I think he's a really, really good prospect. And I underline the word prospect, guys, because these guys have not played in the league yet.
Now, let me ask you, do you put Carnell Tate in the same category just in terms of quality of player as those other two guys, Greg, or is he on a tier a little bit below those guys for you?
A little bit below. I mean, if you know me, guys, I don't necessarily make lists.
Of course.
He'd probably be my number one receiver if I made a list. There's no Jamar Chase in this draft. Let's start there. But I think Tate's going to be a solid pro. I think I asked somebody about Tate versus Ibuka, who came out last year, and the feeling is, they're sort of in the same box. Are they exactly the same? No, but they're kind of in the same box. I mean, I think Tate will be a really solid pro receiver. We get caught up in who's a number one, who's a number two, who's this, who's that. Like I said, there's no Jamar Chase, but I think Tate, yeah, and you know how the NFL is. It depends on the pass game. Sometimes a guy could catch 90 balls, but you would never say that, oh, he's a top 3 receiver in the league.
Right.
He could catch a lot of balls based on the pass game schematics. I mean, look at Wan'Dale Robinson. Wan'Dale Robinson, caught a ton of balls, and I know he's a free agent, but no one's going to say he's a top 3 receiver in the league.
Mm-hmm. Arvell Reese, a guy, Greg, who I think, depending upon the scheme and the coordinator, you may get max value out of him, and maybe you won't. How do you see him translating?
Now, that guy, Paul, is a freak. I would play him on the edge. I think that's where he can be, that's a premium position. Now, keep in mind, when you have to have a plan for him before you draft him, because when you line up your first day of OTAs and you're in shorts and a t-shirt, you got to put him somewhere. You can't put him one place on Monday, another place on Tuesday, another place on Wednesday. You got to teach him how to play one position in the NFL. And I think his most impactful position as he continues to grow and develop, he's 20 years old and is a one-year starter, okay? I think as an edge player that he could be really, really disruptive. He's got power. He's is he truly bendy? Maybe not, but boy, does he have power, and he is an explosive athlete.
Huddle up, get in here. If you're lined up here, you gotta go over the middle with it to score.
Right. How do we make that happen?
I don't know.
But Citizens does.
Make sense of your money with Citizens, official bank of Eli Manning.
Yeah, I think if he develops, I think you're looking at a Will Anderson type, right? In terms of how he plays the position.
I mean, I almost, and again, I hate making these comparisons,
of course,
because that's all people think about instead of going to context and nuance,
yes,
which unfortunately seems to be lost in a lot of conversations these days. But I mean, I looked at him and I thought that down the road there's a Micah Parsons element to his game.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, all right. That's a big name. What do you think of Mansoor Delane out of LSU? Greg?
I've done him.
Yep. What do you think?
I like him. He looks bigger than he is. He plays long. He's very smooth. He's very fluid. He has a great feel for routes. I wouldn't call him sudden and twitchy, but he's really a comfortable looking athlete. I really liked his tape a lot. Again, the corner position, there's a lot of guys, and I haven't gotten to those guys yet because corners take a lot of work to do. But my guess is he'll be in the top 2 or 3. I can't imagine many guys that would be better.
Greg, it's funny, by the way, Paul, real quick. It's funny. When I watched Delane, I even said, we had Dane Brugler on one of our shows, and I said to him, Dane, man, he always gets around the receivers to knock the ball away. He plays like, he's a long player, and he goes, John, he's only going to measure with like 30-inch arms. And I was surprised when I heard that, because I agree with you. When you watch him, he plays long.
And he looks long on tape. Like, when I put the tape on, and I didn't do him last year at Virginia Tech, but obviously I did him this year. I thought, oh, this guy's like 6'2", 205.
I agree.
Then when I looked him up, he's probably going to be 6 feet, 195, but he plays long.
Greg, the positional value thing has a lot of people try to push the tackles maybe higher than their grade should be. Manoanoa and Fano are 2 guys who we think are going to be probably the first 2 tackles taken. But in your opinion, are we looking so much at projection here and possessional value that we're really warping their grades a little too much?
Well, I think in this draft, Paul, you're going to see a lot of guys get drafted, and I think that's true of wide receivers as well. You're going to see them drafted in the first round, and then they become first-round picks who are probably not guys that have universal first-round grades. And the Miami kid, there's a big conversation about whether he's a tackle or a guard, and I bet he gets a shot at tackle, but that I've had that that discussion with O-line people who know more than I do. I did Fano last summer, and I kind of liked the way he played. I think he needs to get stronger. And, when you determine whether a guy gets stronger, think of it this way. If he does everything right from a technique standpoint and he still gets shoved back, then it's not likely that he's going to be able to really deal with speed to power in a great way. If his technique is problematic and that's why he gets pushed back, then an O-line coach can probably say, you know what, if I fix his technique, then he can be better. So, Fano needs to be stronger at the NFL level and anchor better. The Miami kid, he's built like a guard. He's a power player.
Yeah, I'm with you. When I watch Miami, I think he's kind of built like a guard too, but I agree. I think he'll get a chance out there at tackle. Giants Huddle Podcast is brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. From game day celebrations to your everyday financial needs, Giant fans get the most out of every moment with Citizens. Learn more at citizensbank.com/Giants. Greg, I want to switch lanes here and go to the NFL. No one watches more tape than you. What are some of the main trends, both on offense and on defense, separate into two parts, that you saw develop over the course of this season in the NFL, that you think when teams go back and game plan for next season and set up their offense and defenses, that part of the game is going to be supercharged come 2026?
Well, you never know if 1 year, even 2 years signifies a trend. But I think you're seeing a couple of things that you saw a good amount of. Number one, you're seeing on defense, more and more teams play with what we call 4 across, whether you want to call it quarters, cover 4, but 4 across. It's because, the playing with a single high safety, that's nowhere near as in vogue as it used to be, because when you play with 4 across, you take away the seams. And that's a big deal. Because if you want to take away the seams with single high, you got to do some things that compromise your coverage. So you're seeing a lot more 4 across, which, by the way, I think increases the value of defensive tackles. But that's a lengthier conversation. The other thing that you're seeing on the offensive side is an increased use of what we would call base personnel. For years, we spoke about the NFL being an 11 personnel league, meaning 3 wide receivers. Now you're seeing more multiple tight end sets, 2 and even 3 tight ends, fullbacks. Some teams playing with 6 offensive linemen, a good amount. So those are 2 things that immediately come to mind, John, when you ask me about things that I saw more of this year.
I'm curious, you think defensive tackles are more valuable because you don't have that extra guy in the box with the single high and the other safety down low, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so what happens is you don't have a safety as a gap player in the run game.
Right.
So now defensive tackles have to deploy a technique that is called gap and a half, because now they've got to take care of an extra gap because you do not have that extra player in the box.
Greg, we've been asking a bunch of people about this offensive coaching mixture that the Giants have. You got Nagy, right? You got Callahan, you got Roman. This meatloaf of offensive philosophies that's going to be in the Giants coaching room these days. You study NFL tape more than anybody probably on the planet. How do you expect that this meatloaf is going to turn out?
Paul, that's a hard question, and I'm just being honest. I've been asked here at the Combine a lot about Matt Nagy, okay? I can't answer that question. I mean, people say, what's it going to look like? What's the game plan? What's the play calling? You'd have to be sitting in those meetings to know that. I think what they wanted was they probably wanted a good mix of ideas, a good mix of concepts. I'm sure they feel that Jaxson Dart mentally can handle a lot, and they want to give him a lot and let him grow. Brian Callahan has been schooled with a lot of different quarterbacks. He came from Zach Taylor, initially, which is a lot of the McVay. He also worked in Detroit with Matthew Stafford, for a number of years. Mm-hmm. So, he's seen a lot of different concepts and really good quarterback play. He knows what it looks like. Nagy's been with Andy Reid. Don't forget, you can say what you want about Nagy, and I know there's this sense that he's not a good coach, and no one knows that. That stuff's always easy to say. But, don't forget, he made the playoffs with the Bears with Mitch Trubisky. So, yeah. I mean, I don't know the answer to that question other than there's going to be, a good influx of ideas. And I think you want that. And my guess is they believe that Jaxson Dart can handle all that.
If you want to know how to manage 2 minutes of crunch time football, I'm your man. But if you're wondering about a long-term financial plan, you should talk to Citizens. Hey, I can also talk lawn care.
I'd like to learn about a mowing routine.
Yes, I knew I could help.
Make sense of your money with Citizens.
Yeah, let's flip to the defensive side then, Greg. What do you think we're going to get from Denard Wilson based on what you saw from him at Tennessee over the last couple of years and obviously his year before that playing in Baltimore under Mike McDonald?
Denard's a fascinating guy. They didn't blitz very much in Tennessee, but that's because their corners were not very good.
Yeah, because he was under Todd Bowles and Greg Williams, and those guys used to blitz all the time.
Well, I was gonna say that I think deep down he would like to do that, but you have to play to your personnel, and then you have to decide with the Giants, and he'll decide this. Whether he feels good about his corners. Because like I said, in Tennessee, they were playing with backups, street free agents at corner. So, he just didn't feel comfortable with pressure. But I think deep down, he would like to pressure. I can tell you one thing about Denard, because I know him, is, man, he holds guys accountable. There's no BS with Denard Wilson. You'll see it, once he gets started. This guy is serious. He loves ball. He lives ball. He will hold guys accountable in a big way.
Greg, the optimist and the guy who's going to hold out a bunch of hope, says, Harbaugh's in here. Giants won 4 games last year, but they underachieved in a lot of ways, and there's more talent on the roster than people think. In fact, Harbaugh said that as one of the reasons why he came here. Obviously, Dart was the lead guy that he talked about. Your estimation, because you've seen the whole league time and time again, where's the Giants' roster in terms of this division, the NFC East? How close are they? Is Harbaugh really, is he that far out of whack when he says he wants to be able to try to win right away?
Well, I can't, now that it's the off season, Paul, I can't, remember the entire Giants roster, but I think he's there because of the quarterback, because I think the belief is that Jaxson Dart, will be a good player. No one I think can sit here and say he's going to be this or that exactly, but I think he showed enough that you feel like he's going to be a quality NFL quarterback. And from what I understand, he's a pretty sharp kid. So, I think Harbaugh went somewhere where he feels that if there's kind of normal quarterback development, that gives you a chance to win games. Now, no one's going to predict 14-3 or anything like that. Right. But I think the feeling would be that, hey, if Dart continues to develop, you've got 2 veteran offensive coaches in Nagy and Callahan, that this team can, compete. Whatever that means in the context of, number one, the division, where the Eagles have made significant changes that are a total unknown right now, that they can compete in the division. Whether that means, 8 wins, 9 wins, 12 wins, we can't answer that now late in February, but, I think he's there because of the quarterback.
And I know, Greg, that you haven't had time with Dart, but just looking at the film from what you saw on Giants tape last year, what made you the most optimistic about him, and what did you want to see him clean up?
Well, I think as is the case with many quarterbacks who can run, what you've got to clean up is you've got to get him to understand that to run the pass game and to, execute it the way it's meant to be executed. Quarterbacks that can run tend to leave the pocket too early. And they all do that. And he did that. And obviously we saw that he got hurt. That's going to have to change. That's not profound. Everybody knows that. I'm sure it's been talked about 1,000 times. The one thing I think that he really needs to do a better job of, and, now you get into coaching and now you get into whether he can do it, is he just needs to see the field quicker and better, because that means the ball will come out quicker. Mm-hmm. And that's something that you can help him with to a certain point. Some quarterbacks then develop it. Other quarterbacks don't. They just don't see the field well, no matter what. The hope is, I think he's capable of it. I think there were flashes of it, but he definitely needs to be able to do that with far more understanding and clarity.
Greg, you're awesome. Tell the folks what you're up to. I know you've been kind of a constant guest on a couple pods. Anything you have going on that you want the fans to know about?
Well, right now I'm just in draft mode, John. I'm just, it's funny. I can't watch tape here. The days are long and busy and fun, but I can't wait to get back in my office at Films on Monday. And then I'm just going to be grinding until the draft. And I'm really looking forward to doing that.
Yeah, well, we're doing exactly the same, Greg. Let's catch up before the draft. Always appreciate joining us. Thank you so much.
Take care.
All right, guys. Appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Looking for more than just a ticket? Elevate Experiences delivers VIP access to the world's biggest events, from the Super Bowl to NASCAR to PGA Tour tournaments. Don't just attend. Elevate the experience at elevateexperiences.com. That's the Giants Huddle podcast. We'll see you next time, everybody.